Hello, my dear. What a pleasure to have you here again, accompanying another of my stories of marital infidelity. If you are new here, do not waste time, subscribe and be closer to me, and without wanting to abuse your goodwill, leave a like on my video. That fills me with pleasure. When I see the likes, the more the better. My world turned upside down when my cousin Matthias arrived. He awakened in me dark desires that I never imagined having. Despite deeply loving my boyfriend John, I could not resist Matthias's charms. It all started when Matthias appeared in my life. He was charming, mysterious, and made me question everything about myself. Little by little, I became more and more involved with him, leaving aside my relationship with John. I know I made bad decisions, but at the time I was living, it seemed like the right thing to do. The passion for Matthias was overwhelming and I felt unable to control my feelings even knowing that I was hurting John. I could not stop. It was a sunny afternoon and my parents' house was full of activity. They had organized a family reunion inviting all the relatives for a big party. Laughter echoed through the hallways and warm hugs filled the air. I was anxious. It had been years since I last saw all those familiar faces, uncles, aunts, cousins, mixed, creating a scene of affection and nostalgia, but there was someone in particular that I hoped to see again, my cousin Matthias. Matthias was that child with whom I shared adventures at family parties when we were children. I remember the laughter, the pranks in the backyard, and the stories we made up. He always had a mischievous smile on his lips and curious eyes that seemed to hide secrets. As the afternoon progressed, he watched each person who walked through the door, and then, as if fate had conspired in our favor, Matthias appeared, now a tall and charming man with a look that still kept something of that child that I knew. Our reunion was magical. We talked about old times, we laughed at the pranks of childhood and shared stories of our adult lives. Matthias had become a traveler, exploring the world and accumulating experiences. On the other hand side, I was immersed in the routine of the big city. As night fell and the stars appeared in the sky, I realized that meeting was not just a coincidence. It was one of those moments when the past and the present intertwine, creating a unique narrative. Matthias and I were characters in that story, and my parents' house was the perfect setting for that chapter. And so, between laughs and hugs, I met my cousin Matthias again, not as the child with whom I played, but as someone who brought with him precious memories and the promise of new adventures. The family reunion became something more, a journey of reunions and discoveries. The living room was lit by a row of flickering candles, creating dancing shadows on the walls. It was a family reunion night and everyone was there, uncles, cousins, grandparents, and lifelong friends. But for me, everything seemed to fade away when my eyes met Matthias. Matthias was no longer the chubby child I remembered from previous summers. He had transformed into a tall young man with broad shoulders and a smile that made my heart beat. I tried to hide my surprise, but Laura, my best friend, always noticed everything. Laura leaned over and whispered in my ear, "Hey Brittany, who's that hottie?" Dinner continued, but I could barely concentrate on the lively conversations around me. John, my boyfriend, was busy swapping stories with the guys, and I was lost in thoughts about Matthias. How had I gone unnoticed for so long, I wondered. After dinner we all gathered in the backyard. The music started playing, and the guests gave themselves over to dancing and games. I saw myself dancing with John, but my mind was somewhere else. I looked at Matthias, who was laughing with his cousins, and I felt a lump in my throat. What was happening to me? I felt attracted to my own cousin. It seemed crazy, but there I was, torn between the past and the present, between the security with John and the electricity that Matthias awakened in my chest. And so on that magical night I found myself in a dilemma, with my heart racing. I knew I would have to choose between familiarity and the unknown, between what was safe and what made me feel alive. And while the music resonated around me, I wondered if Fate was also dancing with us at that summer party that night. Matthias and I got closer and closer. We talked about our lives and childhood memories, and the complicity we had before seemed to have come back with force. The party was lively, the music was loud, and everyone was having fun. I danced with my boyfriend and some relatives, but my eyes always went back to Matthias. He intrigued me more and more. At one point Matthias and I ended up dancing together. My heart raced as I approached him. Our eyes met, and I felt a spark that it took my breath away. It was exciting but also confusing as we danced. The tension between us seemed to grow with every move. During the dance my mind drifted away from the party. I was in a fantasy world where only Matthias and I existed. I tried to concentrate on what we were talking about, but his eyes and his smile left me confused. It seemed like he could read my thoughts and know exactly what I was feeling. Although I felt guilty for these thoughts, I couldn't help the attraction I felt for my own cousin. I tried hard to stay away from him, but his image kept haunting my thoughts. His eyes, his smile, everything seemed to be engraved in my mind, leaving me restless and confused for the rest of the party. I tried to maintain a normal appearance, but it was as if my head and my heart were in sync. As the night progressed, I began to feel the weight of emotions and accumulated tiredness. Some drinks had left my mind even cloudier, and the mix of feelings was exhausting me. I decided it was time to retire and get some rest. In my room I approached John, my boyfriend, and explained to him that I was a little tired and sleepy, and that I was going to sleep. He looked at me fondly and wished me good night. The way to my room seemed like a labyrinth of emotions. I couldn't stop thinking about Matthias and everything that had happened during the party. I felt confused and a little guilty for the feelings I had experienced towards my own cousin. When I got to my room the bed fell on me. The silence surrounded me, but my mind was still full of thoughts. What was I doing? How could I feel attracted to my own cousin? They were questions that didn't have an easy answer. Tiredness began to torment me, but the more I tried to sleep, the more disturbed my mind became. It was as if a storm of emotions unraveled inside me, leaving me restless and not knowing what to do. After a little nap, I woke up suddenly with an inevitable urgency. I needed to go to the bathroom. When I left the bathroom, I found a surprise. There was my cousin Matthias waiting outside the door. He looked at me in surprise and said, "Brittany, I thought you had already left." I answered with a smile that only I had left. I slept for a while because I was exhausted, and I asked him if he had also retired. Between laughs and jokes an idea came to me. I invited Matthias to go to my room for a bit since there was not much to do at the party and I needed someone to vent to. Already in my room we settled in bed and began to talk. We talked about our lives, our dreams, and our adventures. The conversation flowed easily as if there were no barriers between us. But as time went by, something began to change. The looks between us, they became more intense, and a subtle flirtation entered the conversation. I was attracted to Matthias, and it was evident that he also had feelings for me. I tried to ignore those emotions and concentrate on the conversation, but it was becoming increasingly difficult. What was happening to me? I felt confused and guilty for having those feelings towards my own cousin. In an attempt to divert attention, I mentioned John, my boyfriend. I told Matthias that we had been together for 3 years and that we had many plans. Matthias nodded and looked me in the eyes, saying that he was happy for me and that it was obvious that John and I were very happy together. This broke the tension a little, but my emotions took me down uncertain paths. I decided to lie down on the bed to feel more comfortable. The conversation was still pleasant, but the atmosphere began to change. I felt a little cold, so I decided to cover myself with the sheets. Between laughs and jokes, I told Matthias, "Don't you want to cover yourself? It's cold up here too." To my surprise, Matthias lay down on the bed and covered himself too. I was speechless and a little nervous. What was happening? Despite having been an innocent invitation, the atmosphere became more charged than I imagined. Still a little dazed by the drinks I had had during the party, I didn't say anything and let Matthias stay by my side, but deep down I knew it was dangerous. The emotions and desires were present in the air, and it was difficult to ignore them. The silence took over us. I didn't know what to say or how to act. My heart was beating strongly and my mind was full of contradictory thoughts. I knew that this wasn't right, but I also felt a desire special for Matthias that I couldn't ignore. In the middle of the tension our eyes met. That spark that united us at the party was lit again. It all started with a look, a simple meeting of eyes that unleashed an overwhelming attraction. Me and Matthias, inseparable cousins since childhood, we were always very close, but at that moment something changed. A spark lit between us and the latent desire finally exploded. I knew that was wrong. I had a boyfriend, John, whom I loved and trusted. I couldn't betray that trust. One couldn't compromise our relationship, but the attraction was too strong and resisting seemed an impossible task. When Matthias slowly approached, my heart raced. Our faces were so close that I could feel their breathing. The tension in the air was palpable and the desire consumed me. Without thinking about the consequences, we kissed with passion. Forgetting everything in the darkness of the room, we let ourselves be lifted by the moment. Our hands explored centimeters of skin, the soft and intense caresses, as if our bodies spoke a language of their own. In that instant we were two butts in the passion. When everything ended, reality hit me like a bucket of cold water. What had I done? I felt like a traitor, and the anguish corroded me, and I looked at each other in silence, knowing that this could not continue. We had to hide what had happened, avoid any suspicion. That night after the family party, I could not stop thinking about what had happened. My heart was beating fast, remembering the moments I had shared with my cousin Matthias. I knew that this was wrong, but I could not get those memories out of my head. As I tossed restlessly in bed, I imagined the consequences if someone discovered my secret. I could not even think about the reaction of my family, especially my boyfriend John. That guilt consumed me inside, preventing me from resting. Finally exhausted, I fell asleep, but my dreams were full of nightmares and regrets. Waking up the next day was a true torture. Anxiety dominated me, remembering the events of the previous night. When I finally left the room, I realized that the party was over and my relatives had already left. Everything seemed different to my eyes, as if the world had changed. While I was immersed in my turbulent thoughts, my heart sank thinking about what I had done and the impact it would have on my family. I had no idea how my loved ones would react when they found out the truth. I tried to stay calm and act normal with the few relatives who were still around, smiling and talking as if nothing had happened, but my mind was somewhere else, lost in a whirlwind of emotions, not knowing how to deal with that situation. The next day passed in a seemingly normal way, but inside I felt like my world had turned upside down. I woke up with a mix of relief and guilt. On one hand, I felt relieved that no one suspected what had happened with Matthias. It was as if it were my little secret, but on the other hand, I was full of remorse and confusion. Throughout the day, I tried to maintain my routine and appear normal, as if nothing had happened. I met up with some friends, and we talked about trivial topics, but my mind was busy remembering the moments with Matthias. I had difficulty concentrating and keeping a smile on my face sometimes. I felt guilty for laughing with my friends when my life was full of secrets and lies. When I got home, I sat in my room and thought about everything that had happened. I couldn't believe what I had done, and I felt an adrenaline rush for having had that love affair. It was exciting and passionate, but I also knew it was a mistake. Even though that moment with my cousin Matthias was intense and exciting, I wasn't proud of what I did. He says that secret will torment me forever. I had everything to be happy next to my beloved John, but one day a temptation called Matthias crossed my path. Matthias and I were cousins, but the chemistry between us was undeniable. We began to meet secretly, betraying John's trust. I knew I was doing something wrong, but the desire spoke louder, until one day I woke up and realized I had made a big mistake. I didn't want to lose John, my true love, so I took a hard detour. I cut off all contact with Matthias, and I dedicated myself entirely to my relationship. John never found out about my betrayal. We continued together, building a love ever stronger and more solid, and then came the news that would change it. Everything was pregnant. Pregnancy was a turning point for us. John and I joined, more focused on creating a new life and a future together, and that would be the opportunity to start over, to forget the past and concentrate on what I really loved. By John, of course, from time to time, guilt and regret still tormented me, After all, I had betrayed the trust of my loved one, but I was determined to overcome this, to forgive myself and to further strengthen our relationship. And so John and I moved forward, writing a new love story full of challenges, but also of overcoming, and a love that overcame all barriers. We knew that together we could face anything and lived happily ever after. I know I made a mistake, but I think we all deserve a second chance. If you agree with me, leave your comment and let's chat a little. Leave your like and subscribe so you don't miss my next stories. Until next time.